Welcome to HSBC Global Viewpoint, the podcast series that brings together business leaders and industry experts to explore the latest global insights, trends, and opportunities. Make sure you're subscribed to stay up to date with new episodes. Thanks for listening, and now on to today's show.
Welcome to Under the Banyan Tree, where we put Asian markets and economics in context. I'm your host, Herald van der Linde, head of Asian Equity Strategy here at HSBC. Today, we'll be taking the pulse of the luxury market in Asia and around the world with a special guest. Erwan Rambourg is our global head of luxury and consumer research, and he's based in London. We're talking demographics, innovation, corporate change, and something called Greedflation. Plus, how did COVID spark an industry reset, and does anyone actually need luxury goods? Spoiler alert, the answer is no. Let's get the conversation started under the Banyan Tree. Erwan, thanks for coming on to the podcast.
It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Fantastic. So Erwan, in your world of luxury, you got basically two behemoths. You got the US market, that's a big buyer of luxury, and actually it's the Chinese market. So you're here in Asia to get a bit of a feel what is going on, right? So what are your general impressions? Where did you go? You went to Southeast Asia and you went to China?
Yeah, I spent a week in Singapore, and then I spent a week, we have this traditional week-long China tour.
Yeah, with all kinds of luxury investors, right?
Absolutely. So we had about 12 investors, and we met a lot of brands, a lot of shopping mall operators, consultants, experts.
You went into the stores, but you also saw the management of these brands.
Absolutely.
What sort of companies are we talking about? Are we talking about international brands like the LVMHs and Cartiers and
yes,
and listed and unlisted?
Listed and non-listed. It's easier with investors to see privately held companies and experts and consultants and the like. And I have to say, we do this once a year. Last year was a bit depressing. This year was quite uplifting.
Okay.
I'm not implying people are bullish, but clearly the tone has been significantly more constructive.
So that means sales are better now. Is that across the whole region? Is that also Southeast Asia? Or is that only China? Or is there a bit of a differentiation there?
I think the feedback when I was in Singapore was that Southeast Asia is probably the only region with Europe which is not improving. Mm-hmm. It's not deteriorating, but it's not improving. It's going sideways. Whereas if you look at Greater China, there you really see an inflection. So we're not calling out growth. We're calling out improvement. So it's what we would call the second derivative of growth. The growth of growth is improving. Meaning if your brand was collapsing 3 quarters ago, it might still be declining, but significantly less so. And if your brand was flattish 3 quarters ago, you're probably now growing. So the direction of travel, if you want to put it that way, is very positive.
Yeah. And so Southeast Asia, not so strong. China, a little bit better.
Yes.
What about the different layers of brands? So you got, to keep it very simple for myself, you got the super high brand, you got medium brands. I always think you got low end brands, right?
Yeah.
Low end brands are entry level brands. Is that a reasonable way to think about it? And what are some of the brands, how they're positioned? And is there differentiation between these brands from what you've heard on your trip?
Yeah, I think so. What we pointed to in terms of big issues in the sector were essentially 3 factors hitting. One was macro. And we haven't really picked up that macro is improving.
So the economy is not really doing that well yet. So that's not really stimulating.
It's essentially, if you look at the property market, if you look at youth unemployment, that's still quite hurtful in China. The second element is what we call greedflation. So this idea that many brands post-COVID got a bit ahead of themselves by increasing prices way too quickly. And that sort of alienated quite a few consumers. And the third issue was the lack of creativity. So if I take your classification of high, middle, low, low access price points, value type brands are actually doing quite well because they're an afterthought. The super high-end brand...
Give me an example of one of these lower-end brands.
So these are, if you look at the private part, you can look at Longchamp or Tory Burch. If you look at some brands that are part of listed companies, you can look at Coach, for example. What Americans would call affordable luxury.
Okay.
So those are resonating, those are doing well, and they've been reasonable in terms of prices. At the other end of the spectrum, you have the very high-end brands. So think about Brunello Cucinelli, think about Hermès, think about Cartier Van Cleef and the hard luxury, meaning jewelry side of things. Those are also doing quite well. Those that are stuck in the middle are, I would say, the poster children in terms of, again, greedflation and a lack of innovation. So you can think about Dior, you can think about Gucci, you can think about Saint Laurent, the new name of Yves Saint Laurent, and those needed to reinvent themselves. And you've had some trading up and trading down, but the middle has been squeezed. Actually makes me wonder on your side if there are any more macro-related issues to explain why the middle would be squeezed.
Well, two things come to mind. First of all, if the economy is weak, you would think people would trade down in most goods. Although maybe luxury, the dynamics are different. So I can understand that that would already support the low end in the luxury market more so than, say, the middle end. But I think there might be something else going on. Because what we had, in particular in China before COVID, was the rise of the empty nester. So the average Chinese was getting into their 40s. There was a lot of people moving from, say, into the bracket of 45 to 60. That meant that their children were at university age, if you want to put it like that. They left home, and these people were therefore empty nesters at home. And these people had left university in 1995, had benefited from the rise of China, bought their property in 2000. Yes, so property come down, but I mean, they bought it 20 years, 25 years ago. So they were well in the money. And they're in a very comfortable sort of situation. And I think what we saw prior to COVID is that they would tell to their children, hey, you can buy some luxury, buy your Celine bag or whatever you want to their children, right? Then COVID happened, and that was a sort of disruption. So we can't really see too much what happened there. Everything was down. And now COVID is over. I think that empty nester story might come back, but in a different sort of shape, because these children were university age prior to COVID. Now we've all gotten a little bit older. They have their own job. So now the dad might say, listen, you buy your own bag or you buy your own shoes. Yeah, you're 26. You sort yourself out. It's time for me to completely take care of myself. So I travel. I want to go and stay in nice hotels. And maybe that explains why that high-end and luxury is doing so well. I'm going to buy my own nice watch for my wife or whatever I buy, right?
I think, I think the lack of creativity and the so-called greedflation also likely accelerated a move away from product accumulation to experiences. Because if that handbag is pretty much the same as it was 3 years ago, but it's 60% more expensive, why bother? And indeed, you would look at those 3,000-4,000 euro equivalents, and you'd rather go travel, go to a nice hotel, go to a Michelin star restaurant, accumulate memories and experiences. Rather, no one needs yet another handbag if it's not compelling. So this brings me back to the reality that luxury serves no purpose but to put a smile on your face and to basically
that's right,
help you have a better outlook. So the reason I came back from this China trip more constructive is, again, this idea that no one needs luxury. It's just escapism. It enables you to project a better future. And on our trip a year ago, very clearly the mood music was down, was quite depressing. Again, I'm not saying the people I met in Shanghai and Wuhan and Hong Kong were bullish, but they're clearly more constructive. I think 3-4 quarters ago, luxury managers were deer in the headlights. They didn't know what was hitting them. They were a bit in a panic. The same people today, they've made a few changes in their teams, in their retail footprint, in their product assortment, and very clearly there's a brighter future ahead.
Yeah. And that growth will hopefully then come back, and depends on the macro sort of stuff as well, of course. What about some of the other regions in Asia, like Japan and Korea? They're relatively big consumer markets as well, right?
So the Japanese local market was quasi-dominant actually 20 years ago for luxury. 20 years ago, luxury used to be a European sector with a strong Japanese following. The rest of the world hadn't discovered. The Japanese consumer is still quite influential. Japan in 2024 saw a boom, which was not related to the local consumer, but more to price arbitrage with the weakness of the yen. So you had a lot of tourists, Chinese, but also American, European, other Asians, just playing that price arbitrage. That has now reversed with the yen stabilizing. So year on year, Japan is down quite a bit. But again, you're not completely losing that consumer, because that consumer now is staying at home, spending in China or other parts of the region. So actually, Japan is still quite relevant. Korea is a very bright spot right now.
Oh, yeah.
Which is surprising because it's, to your point, not as if it were a small market. It's a pretty sizable market for luxury. But Korea, and maybe I'd love to have your view on this, but Korea seems to be somewhat correlated to the U.S. market in the sense that when U.S. markets, equity markets are strong, it seems that the Korean equity market is also strong, and that's helpful in terms of recruiting the future cohort of consumers.
Well, that's actually interesting. I never thought about it, but it is right that the Korean market has got a very strong relationship with the US because Korean companies basically build and make stuff for the global economy. So the US is a very big market for them, and therefore, if the US goes up, Korea tends to be as well. And another thing in Korea is, of course, that we see across the whole of Asia, including my nieces in Jakarta, they're flying to Korea because that's where you buy your creams and your cosmetics and these sort of things. And there's this sort of Hallyu, they call it, the Korean sort of soft power that is developed over the last decade or so.
So we've picked up some enthusiasm linked to equity markets in Korea. People keep on telling me about crypto. I'm always a bit wary when I hear people in the U.S. telling me about crypto because I don't think it's an important driver for luxury sales. It's seemingly in Korea, youth wealth is somewhat more tied to crypto than in the U.S. And, recently you've had a lot of excitement as well. So it is surprising because, again, Korea is a big market for luxury, but it's doing very well.
Fantastic. So basically we got demographics, we got greedflation, is a new word for me, I like that one. We got kind of different regions doing very differently. That sets the stage a bit. I suggest we take a break now, and then I want to come back and look a little bit more deeper into some of the companies that you look at, because there's been all kinds of M&A and new Chinese companies emerging. So let's take a look at that. So, Erwan, there's been a lot of kind of changes. You talked about mid, low, and high end in luxury, but there's been all sorts of M&A companies buying each other. You also mentioned sometimes lack of innovation. That might be something to do with it. And you spoke a bit about kind of management and design. Is that role of the kind of famous designer is seemingly changing as well? Can you enlighten me a bit on that?
Yeah, there's been a lot of change because I think you had a difficult post-COVID digestion phase, if I could put it that way. You had a boom right after COVID where people were queuing up to buy luxury. And you thought, oh, well, if she's queuing to buy my products, presumably I've got pricing power. So that led to greedflation. Yeah. And because she was queuing to buy your products, you thought, I have the right product. And actually, you were wrong on both fronts.
As you say, it's all about pleasure. There's no goal in luxury. It's just about getting it and enjoying it and feeling good about it.
Absolutely. And so that led to a bit of a reckoning where a lot of the groups, very rapidly changed brand CEOs to reboot and changed designers in the case of fashion, led companies. And this season of, there's been a lot of press around the Milan and the Paris fashion shows. You had more than 50 new designers presenting for the first time on their given brand. So, of course, the ones that have been highlighted the most have been Chanel, have been Dior, have been Gucci, where you have high hopes. And I'm quite hopeful because the reality of what went wrong in luxury over the past 2 years is a lack of traffic. If it's overpriced, if it's repetitive, why would I push the door? Yeah. And so as a consequence, traffic came down dramatically. And the way I think about 2026 for the space is you finally are providing excuses for that consumer to come back. She will push the door. Will she buy the latest designs from Gucci, Dior, Chanel? Doesn't really matter if she buys that. What matters if your sales associates are trained appropriately is that she pushes the door. Yeah. If you're good, whether she buys that or something else, doesn't really matter. You'll convert her. Yeah. It's a bit like, Vuitton Beauty. Vuitton launched beauty with a very controversial approach where they have the highest priced lipstick on the planet. It's about $160, which is like twice the price of Hermès. So people are saying, oh, what a shame, etc. Is Vuitton in the business of selling lipsticks? Of course not. They just want to generate that traffic. And once you're in store, if you have sticker shock and that lipstick's too expensive for you, it's okay. Herald, let me show you a pair of sneakers. Let me show you a small...
I'm not so big in lipstick anyway. But
I was about to say. But the idea is generate that interest, generate that traffic, have her come back to the store, and I will, it's my mission as a sales associate to convert her on that or something else.
And in Asia, are these sales associates trained for that as good as they are in Europe, or maybe even better? I don't know. Is that
Yeah,
something
absolutely.
that
I
you
think
should do?
I think a decade ago, actually in China, local Chinese consumers were quite distrustful. That has flipped completely because it's a high priority for luxury companies. I was mentioning the Vuitton Beauty launch. It was actually a China exclusive before they started to roll it out elsewhere.
Yeah.
China tends to get better assortment, better advice from beauty advisors or sales consultants.
So they're well trained.
And they tend to get first dibs, if I can put it that way.
And we also see now that Chinese luxury brands are rising, right? In 2007 or 8, you had the first rise of Chinese sort of brands, but it was more in footwear and in shirts and these sort of things. And some made it, some didn't do very well.
Right.
But now in luxury, we also see Chinese brands coming in, right? And you visited some of them in their stores,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. So I still don't really see an alternative to, let's say, a Vuitton, a Chanel, a Gucci, a Dior, an Hermes. But we do see a few things happening that are really interesting. The emergence of Lao Pu, for example, in jewelry.
Yeah. What do they do? It's jewelry and it's gold.
So it's essentially gold-based jewelers. They are neither a commodity seller like you might describe a Chow Tai Fook or Look for very big
Chow Tai
retailers.
Fook, those are Hong Kong, a company that originated in Hong Kong, but runs jewelry stores, a whole chain of stores in mainland China, right?
Yeah, actually, they have several thousand stores in mainland China. And you can buy jade-based and gold-based products, essentially. But they will come across as being a commodity seller.
Yeah.
So very different from some of the Western brands like Cartier, Bulgari, Tiffany, for example. And Lao Pu is sort of a hybrid, meaning they are gold-based, but they have designs that really resonate with the Chinese culture. And their prices are somewhat also a hybrid, between commodity sellers and Western imported brands. So very, very fascinating business model. There's another brand in a completely different vertical, which is called Songement, Songmont, which is affordable handbags. Think about a Polène or a Longchamp or a Coach or a Michael Kors or a Tory Burch. It's that sort of segment. It's about an eighth or a tenth of the price of a Vuitton or Dior or Gucci handbag. So it's not a direct competitor. It's sort of, my first branded handbag if I'm an 18-year-old, which possibly serves in terms of acceptance of paying up for branded goods.
That's interesting because they must be pushing somebody else in the market away, right? So those middle brands that you spoke about at the very beginning, they're not doing so well. But part of the reason might well be because there's more competition there.
Yeah, I think if you go back to the idea of greedflation, as you went too high too quickly, you've created what U.S. investors would call a lot of white space. And you've helped lower position brands to actually step up and emerge.
Well, this is incredibly interesting, Erwan. So basically what I've learned is that COVID has been a reset for the industry. People initially thought when suddenly everybody came back into luxury that they could reprice themselves. That has not worked out very well. But what you now see is that they have to be more innovative, and some of the brands can, some struggle. And we now see Chinese brands coming in. So there's a lot of M&A in the industry as well, and new designers. So there's a whole new sort of luxury industry slowly emerging, coming out of this.
And we're exiting complacency and we're entering a more hopeful era, I would say.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks a lot. I've learned a lot today. Thanks for coming on to the Banyan Tree, and hope that maybe next time you come through the region again, we can pick it up again and see what has changed then.
With pleasure. Hope to see you soon.
And that brings us to the end of another great conversation here in the Hong Kong studio. A pleasure as always having you with us. Under the Banyan Tree is an HSBC Global Investment Research production, and our producer is Graham Mackay. We'll be back again next week. In the meantime, give our sister podcast, The Macro Brief, a listen for the latest on economic trends shaping investments around the world. Take care. Till the next one.
Thank you for joining us at HSBC Global Viewpoint. We hope you enjoyed the discussion. Make sure you're subscribed to stay up to date with new episodes.